So those were my references that I will be using as I go on with this speech. So how many of us have waken up every day and you first thing you do is check the weather? And the next thing, let's say when you're cooking, how about when you set your oven to a certain temperature, right? So I mean your oven has a internal thermometer. Or what about when you're feeling a little under the weather? Well, there's one thing you do to check and see do you have a fever. You grab a thermometer to check your temperature. So those are some of the things that we have come accustomed to that we don't think about every day. And a little simple device as a thermometer has really changed society in such a way that we wouldn't have some of the same luxuries we have today if it wasn't for this guy named Daniel Fahrenheit in 1709. He invented something that we use today, which is our modern day thermometer. He came up with a thermometer, he came up with the numerical scale, and he also came up with the freezing and boiling point of 32 degrees and 212 degrees. Within that same year, an inventor named Andes Celsius, he came up with the Celsius scale, right? I think that's pretty interesting. And he came up with the ranges from 0 to 100 and the freezing point from 0 and the boiling point to 100 degrees Celsius. And I get both of those from my Melovac reference and then my Zimmerman reference. Couple years later, then a guy named Clifford, he came up with a thermometer that was a lot faster, that it only took 5 minutes. It made it user friendly, so it wasn't on such a huge scale, and it wasn't so big. At first, thermometers were like 12 inches long, and then he came up with one that was like 6 inches long and was able to take a temperature within 5 minutes. So that is awesome. And then 2 years later, after him, this guy named Carl Wenderlich, he invented he didn't invent, what he did was he came up with the normal body temperature. Everybody thought the normal body temperature was 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Carl Wunderlich came up with the body temperature that we're not necessarily at 100 degrees. We're at 98.6, and it fluctuates every now and then. But if it gets too high, that's when you know you have a fever. And so because he came up with that thing, he became he became to be known as the father of clinical thermometry. And I got that from my Raybolt reference. Okay. And so thermometers, within those things I've said, like thermometers there can be so many uses for thermometers. So therefore we got to have different types of thermometers. One is like a bimetallic thermometer that we use every day. Another one is an infrared thermometer. Another one is a surface thermometer that we use on our forehead and for our ears. You have a thermocouple thermometer in which we use for food in our food industry. So you got all these different types of thermometers and different uses. And sometimes there are some things that we use that can alter the thermometers. So one thing is, you've ever had a child and your child wants to get out of school for a day, they might get that thermometer and place it over a light bulb and then put that thermometer in their mouth. So the surroundings is one thing that affects thermometers. Another thing that may affect thermometers, the reading of thermometers, is what you eat. So if you eat something cold and then you go get your temperature, the thermometer is going to read at a lower temperature because it's getting the temperature of your mouth instead of the full body temperature. So there are a lot of things that can affect the readings of thermometers, even the calibration. And so that's one thing we have to do to make sure our thermometers are in working condition, is to make sure that you calibrate the thermometers. And so to physically calibrate the thermometers, you have two methods. You have the ice method, which is 50-50 mixture of ice and water, and you calibrate it like that. And I got that from my Hinderman reference, and I also have that as my personal reference because I'm a military food inspector and I teach. And so one thing we have to do is calibrate thermometers. So I teach my soldiers how to calibrate thermometers. So then when they go into these establishments and these plants and these factories, we know that they're serving and they have the food at the right temperature, or they're processing things at the right temperature, so that we don't get foodborne illnesses that could wipe out a city, honestly. Um, and then the very last thing that I will have is just after the other type of calibration is that you have a machine and you have to send your thermometers off. And when you send your thermometers off, it might take time to bring them in. So you want to make sure that you have more than one thermometer. So I actually have a couple thermometers here with me today. So this one is a thermometer and this goes from 1 to 800, but this one is a hot thermometer. So it only measures hot heat and humidity. This is one that I use for my daughter, and so it goes across the forehead. And this is a digital thermometer. This one is one that you see more often. This is the bimetallic thermometer. And so this is the ones that we actually use every day in our schoolhouse. And so you can use this one for temperatures and then for temperatures of the human body. And you can also use this one for temperature of food. And you can insert it, if you can see it, it's a little indentation there. And that's how far you have to insert it. We have something called a thermocouple. And this is what you will use to calibrate it. You'll do a 50-50 mixture and you want something like this to keep it insulated so that the temperature won't be dropping while you're trying to calibrate your thermometer. So I hope everybody enjoyed my speech today. Those were a couple things that I just wanted to point out that, hey, we have luxuries in life and we don't really think about the small things. And if we didn't have these thermometers, our life would be changed upside down, totally upside down. My daughter, she was in an incubator. And so with an incubator, it keeps their body at a certain temperature. And so my daughter wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for that. Y'all have a good day, and I hope y'all appreciated my speech on thermometers.